The movie opens with a female character wearing a mask made out of an animal skull, tearing down police tape. She compares this action to a hawk butchering its prey between its talons slowly. She further considers the tape as a symbol of our exclusively human concerns, and how if we cut through it, we can enter into an extra-human reality. Transitioning through a lake covered in ferns, we see two sisters walking up a flight of stairs into what looks like a gazebo made out of wood. One of the sisters, Jory, asks the other sister, Kaidon, about the most macabre thing she remembers. Kaidon tells her about a day when she was a kid. She woke up to a streak of blood on her pillow. She doesn't remember where the blood came from, only that she questioned it a lot. Jory doesn't remember seeing such from their childhood, so they both agree it was probably a dream, like something from one of Jory's stories. Cutting to the lake, now covered with more ferns. We see the two sisters sitting down at a dock, staring out into the lake. Jory started to catch Kaidon up on what had been going on in her life, talking about how she started a night class on romantic poetry, with emphasis on the metaphysical. Kaidon interrupts her and asks if she is still religious, to which Jory replies, no. Jory tells Kaidon that they should probably get inside soon. Kaidon teases her saying she is scared of snakes, but Jory brushes it off saying Kaidon was just as afraid as she was. As they stand up to head inside, Kaidon says there are some horror movies in the house that they could watch. Back at the house, the sisters talk about horror movies and their usual typical themes. Jory says that all horror movies are about prying into private places, and the discoveries are like a long fall through the dark. Jory mentions one of Kaidon's stories, a girl character named Lizzie, snooping through her family members' private things. Lizzie tries snooping into her stepbrother's closet and falls through a trapdoor. Lizzie's fall ends with her at the bottom of a well beneath the house, with a broken ankle. There, she meets a troll who tells her that the only way to get back up and heal her ankle is to follow 3 special laws. If she does, the pool of blood on her ankle would create a ladder that she could use to climb to the top of the trapdoor. The troll tells Lizzie that of the 3 rules, the most special one is this: no snooping. But obviously, this is a problem because Lizzie can't resist snooping around. Back to reality, Jory asks Kaidon if she always writes anonymously. But Kaidon tells her that she doesn't like the attention, especially not for this kind of work. Jory asks if all her stories spray blood, to which she answers yes. Kaidon goes on to talk about her writing, and how it depicts mutilation as a form of showing the inner core of a person, revealing how readers yearn to see the private parts of the characters they read about, even though they shouldn't want that. We then see the sisters on a boat moving through the lake. Kaidon mentions how she called Jory over the years they were apart, to try and make sense of what happened that made them go their separate ways. And Jory didn't pick up. Jory apologizes and tells her that it took her a while to get through it. But now she has a plan. A plan to help them move past their troubles and into a tense of future joy. Kaidon is confused as to why Jory brought her out to the lake, which, in her own words, seems prehistoric, to talk about future joy. Jory reassures her that all would be revealed soon. It seems Jory simply wants to catch up with her sister, because she hadn't realized how much she missed her. After this, we see more scenes of the lake, followed shortly by a monologue by Jory. Jory talks about and gives us a mental image of it, a deceased body, pale as stone, floating beneath a river, trailed by fish and birds. She states that what is important isn't the intent behind, but rather the ideation of to imagine a migraine of consciousness, over and done. Kaidon begins her monologue by talking about how she and her sister were pressured as kids to keep a secret, and even though they destroyed all evidence of what they did, the secret itself ate them alive inside. Flashback 12 years ago. The two sisters were on a farmland. They were shown doing chores around the house. After their work, they sat behind a cart of hay as they lamented about their situation. They had been sold to a seemingly senile old man, and they were left to tend to him and his house for the rest of their lives. We then see Kaidon in the room of the old man as he climbed into bed so that he can have his way with her for the night. The next morning, we see Kaidon walking across the grass still in her nightgown. Later that day, we see the sisters in a part of the house holding axes. They are practicing how to mimic a scenario similar to a person falling on an axe by accident. Jory tells Kaidon to take it slowly to practice precision. Fast forward to the present, we see the sisters running after the same woman we saw at the beginning wearing the animal skull mask. It turns out she was a thief. She stole a suitcase from the sisters' house, but her getaway driver panicked and drove off without her, leaving the thief on her own. The thief immediately went on the defensive and pulled out a machete threatening to butcher the sisters' husbands and daughter if they came after her. In the next scene, We see Jory calling her family back home to check if they are alright. As she gets off the phone, Kaidon enters and asks if she is okay, which she is. Kaidon asks Jory if her husband knows about their secret, but Jory shakes her head, implying that she hasn't told him anything about it. Everywhere goes silent for a while. Then Jory changes the topic and begins making fun of the thief and her wolf skull mask. She also mentions how cowardly the driver was. Jory interrupts their laughs and tells Kaidon that she thinks they should stay longer on vacation. Kaidon gets suspicious and asks Jory if she orchestrated the whole thing just so they could get their mind off the secret that was burdening. Jory thinks she is joking, but once she realizes she isn't, she immediately denies having a hand in it. Kaidon tells Jory that maybe it's too late for them to have a normal relationship. Jory begs her not to think that way, but instead try harder to make things work. Just then, a car pulls up to the front of their house. It is a man who volunteered as a ranger and was also a pastor at a congregational church in town. The man tells the sisters that he and some of the other rangers chased the thief into the woods but lost her trail. He tells them about a community called the Fringe that lives in the woods and how even though they're not normally violent, some of them, known as drifters, usually get aggressive and act on their own. Jory asked if he was going to check their house to make sure it was safe, but the man tells them that he only came to inform them that the woods near their house are clear. The sisters want to go and see this fringe community for themselves, but the man advises against it. Instead, he mentions that he could come back and check the house later if they wanted him to which they agree. Later that night, while Kaidon is asleep, she has a nightmare. In it, she goes outside after hearing noises, and she stumbles upon a scene where Jory is a part of some ritualistic ceremony involving the pastor and the thief. She also sees some frightening images of the old senile man. She wakes up from the nightmare, startled, but before being able to make sense of things, she hears noises and chatter from outside the house. She goes to check it out, and it is her sister Jory and the pastor who are having a conversation on the front porch. The next morning, the pastor brings them to a facility where they breed a kind of weevil. These weevils are thrown into the lake so that they could feast on the leaves covering it, and thus clear out the lake in the process. Jory and the pastor strike up a conversation about how magical the lake is, as though there were a separation, a natural place and a place of ambition, a place of concrete skin. The pastor agrees and mentions that there was encroachment there and the place needed preserving. Jory changes the topic and asks the pastor if, at his church, they say God's plan. The pastor agrees. He says it's helpful. A plan presents a sense of authority in the face of the unknown. He asks Jory what word she would use, to which she replies, spectacle, as in God's spectacle. God's spectacle, which includes individual damage. She throws a question out there. Can the prospect of a double be possible? A double that prepares us for survival, a representation of ourselves. She asks him to imagine she had a double, someone who struggles, but also sets the stage for her to live more wisely. The pastor asks if she is talking about Kaidon. Jory tells him that they have been separated for so long, and the lake was their reunion. She tells him that she believes she has a way forward for her and her sister, a path she didn't know about before. Jory talks about how, rather than toil and reward being something that happens one after another, they happen simultaneously instead, like an experience between doubles. One struggle prepares the other's survival. They're at the same pace. She further likens it to an event rather than a straight pathway, an event where the doubles meet and are made equal. The pastor asks the nature of the event, and Jory replies and tells him it is an extreme one. While their conversation goes on, Kaidon stumbles upon the thief in the woods. We then cut to another part of the woods, where the thief is. The thief begins telling the story of a girl named Lizzie. Lizzie is alone in the forest. A sour spell has taken over her. She struggles up a hill, the way a newborn calf struggled to his feet. She wobbles in and out of the black shadows cast by the cypresses. There are crows, shiny and loud. Lizzie is on the lookout for a circle of stones, a healing place that was assembled on the hill hundreds of years ago. The spell makes her ears hurt and her stomach turn. She looks forward to laying down in the circle of stones, covering herself with ferns and dirt. The stones would dissipate the spell, or so she hopes. Lizzie moves from tree to tree, handling each one for support. She is losing all her strength. All at once, the insects go dumb. The crows were high up in the quiet. Lizzie feels like she is being watched. A black cat walks by, delicate and precise. Lizzie feels thoroughly searched, and then she sees the hunter standing on the side of the hill watching her. The hunter is a woman with a striking face and powerful eyes. Lizzie thinks she was probably a goddess there to guide her or else assassinate, possibly do both. The hunter asks why she is here. She tells her she wants to change her life. The hunter asks what is wrong with it, and Lizzie tells her that she has been a terrible person, and she is in so much pain. Lizzie tells her she needed to think about her life and find a new way to be. The hunter asks her if she thinks she possibly deserves to pass away. Lizzie tells her that she prefers to live. She says that if there is a way to live and be changed, she wants that. The hunter asks what she's willing to do, and Lizzie tells her she'll do anything. Lizzie, growing weary and losing hope, asks the hunter if she has the authority to help her. The hunter says yes, but an exchange is necessary. The hunter tells Lizzie that she must bring her too. Then she will have the opportunity to reform. Lizzie agrees and tells the hunter she would bring her too. We cut away to the lake, but this time, it has cleared up most of the leaves there. Then we hear Jory having another conversation with the pastor in the background, as we see scenes of her and her sister moving around their house area. Jory says she had a recognition, like a face that suddenly appears at the window. At first, it's a surprise. Then she talks again about how she found a way for her and her sister to let the pain of her past stay in the past. They both understood that they couldn't possibly make each other feel what the gap of years was like for each other. Kaidan stayed solitary while Jory tried to make a life for herself. Jory states that right now there is a gap between her and Kaidan, a history of absence and the pain of absence. She thinks that what might help would be a shock of the news. The idea is to create a new beginning. It has to be a profound experience, something that regenerates their relationship and allows them to reshape their understanding of one another. The pastor asks what the shocking experience was, and Jory tells him that it had to do with the thief. Later in the night, the thief arrives in the room of Kaidan again. She climbs into bed with her, takes off her wolf skull mask, pats Kaidan's head, and then goes to sleep. Kaidan just sleeps back without a word. Flashback to their time at the old senile man's house. The two sisters dragged their axes on the ground as they approached the old man. The man was seen to be fixing his car when he suddenly heard footsteps behind him, followed by blinding flashlights in his face. Before he could get a grasp on what was going on, the two sisters began cutting him and hitting him hard with their axes, butchering him in the process. Back in the present, we see the sisters taking a leisurely boat ride across the lake while taking pictures of the trees and surrounding areas along the way. We then see the hunter in the woods again. This time she is on her own. She tells an old story about snakes saving the hearts of humans. Cold-blooded snakes can live for a time without their hearts, gaining warmth instead by gliding their bodies across sunlit grass and stone. To protect their hearts from trample or combat, snakes often hide their hearts in stronger vessels. The hunter talks about how there are people so cut off from their memories that their hearts grow cold. No disguise can truly hide them, no matter their appointments or how they surround themselves. They are deeply alone. She goes back to the snake story, saying that the snakes seek out such people to hide their hearts in, further saying that people who don't know their own hearts won't notice that they also carry a snake heart. The hunter also talks about how there are stories about people who perished from terrible loneliness, saying that as many as 20 snake hearts have been found in a lonely person who passed away. And sometimes, people pass away when the snakes come to retrieve their hearts. They see snakes approaching and misunderstand the situation. If the snake is cut in two by a worried host, there is a heart within that person that is deceased. If the snake strikes the person, the poison that goes into the veins will affect the hidden heart. The hunter changes the topic and talks about axes and dirt. She says that there are people who bury their axes but never forget them, and there are people who bury their axes and uncover them every night just to hold them in secret. And some people bury axes and will tell you to your face that they never carried an axe in all their life. The hunter talks about dirt and says that snakes are careful of their bellies in the dirt where axes are hidden. They know that they have to put their hearts somewhere safe. They can sense those people cut off from their memory, people with buried hearts. Such obstinate sadness is the perfect hiding place. Word travels fast when there is a suitable host for the snakes to save their hearts. But the hunter says, there is always a risk. A person burdened by too many snake hearts will find oneself standing at the edge of a cliff or deep water and look into it and search it with the bloody weight of desire, a desire that drenches the world in a cold chill. We watch out for such people. We then see the thief in the woods with the pastor. They both seem to be engaging in something. The pastor read from his Bible, as the thief simply danced around him and lurked around the woods, alternating between the two actions. The thief would also move him from one location to the other at different intervals. Later that evening, the two sisters were back at their house, having a conversation on the front porch. Jory tells Kaidan that she believes in doubles, and that they are each other's doubles. Although not an exact likeness, doubling was one of nature's irregular patterns. It was a way of expressing personal satisfaction and personal crisis. And perhaps, one struggle sets the stage for the other to live more wisely, even prosperously. She also mentions how heaven allows individual damage, but a double can absorb some of that damage. Jory tells Kaidan that she thinks that is the case between her and Kaidan. She tells Kaidan that she thought they would find a leveling experience out here by the lake. She says that she knows about the fringe group and how they've taken liberties with the rental cabins. She says that the darkness that marks them is similar to the darkness that marks the thief. She stands before a mirror and sees an image that's evolving. The image supersedes the host, and soon she'll be brand new, like a snake shedding its skin. Jory goes on to compare their lives, saying that Kaidan lives alone and works anonymously, while she has her students and her family. Jory says that she thinks what happened between Kaidan and Old Carl, and how they both fixed Old Carl, resulted in an imbalance. Old Carl is the senile old man that they used to live with 12 years ago, and later butchered brutally with their axes. She says that they're forever drawn back into their sin against Old Carl. The next day, while taking a walk in the woods, Kaidan runs into the thief again. The thief says to Kaidan that she has just eaten a concoction of grass and flowers. She tells Kaidan that it doesn't make her whole, but maybe it would strike her fancy. Kaidan gives her a look of disgust. The thief notices and tells Kaidan that she isn't as wretched as she thought. They both go on a walk, and the thief tells Kaidan about how when she was a kid, she drew little forest creatures wearing human clothes, Victorian dresses and waistcoats, with moist eyes looking out at you. The thief says that they weren't very good, and she thinks most of them were traced out of some book by her, but she could sort of see in them what her mind intended them to be. Portrait after portrait, adding up to a little society. She would spread them out and feel fellowship. The thief and the hunter keep on walking through the woods, and Kaidan suddenly comes to a stop. The thief notices and asks Kaidan if she feels the presence too. The presence of the hunter. Kaidan asks where the hunter is. The thief points to behind the trees. The hunter is chewing on a dead doe. The thief tells Kaidan that the hunter wouldn't want to be seen in that state, so she advises them to stay and wait a bit more until after she has finished feeding. Apparently, she is better after having blood. The thief tells Kaidan that it is the absence of meaning in what you live at the moment you are living it that multiplies the possibilities of your imagination. Kaidan tells the thief that she grew up in the country, and the thief tells Kaidan that she grew up in the city. The thief assumes that probably the things she had were nicer than the things that Kaidan had. The thief asks Kaidan if she is happy. Kaidan replies and says that she had thought life wasn't worth living, but it is worth thinking about. The thief talks about how when she was small, she was once held down by several older boys. It set her off to a bad start. The thief asks Kaidan to consider how she might go on thinking about her life, even after she loses her life. To think about what everlasting means. Without realizing it, Kaidan begins daydreaming, and the thief takes her to an unknown place. The thief has taken her to see the hunter, saying she is ready to receive her now. Kaidan grows nervous and begins moving back away from the thief. The thief asks where she is going, and Kaidan tells her she is leaving. The thief tries to persuade her, but Kaidan tells her that she don't want her coming around the cabin. She tells the thief to leave her and Jory alone. The thief tells Kaidan that she doesn't need to come to the cabin to find her. Kaidan threatens to alert the rangers, but all the thief says is that she and Kaidan are now tethered, and she doesn't need to be afraid. She tells Kaidan to let events run their course. Kaidan makes a run for it immediately, running as fast as she can through the woods. She gets home by the time the sun had set, but all the while running she has flashbacks of what happened with Old Carl, so she looks very distraught once she sits down to relax. The next morning, Jory continues her monologue about how she thought a thief would provide her and her sister with the shock of the new, how they would have a new challenge to unite them, a shared experience that would allow them to begin again. Moving forward, that would be the story they would tell everyone, how they chased a thief that trespassed against them, ran her deep into the forest and gone. This story would supplant the story of Old Carl. Her goal is to control the narrative. The story puts all their experiences and all their dreams into balance. But doubling now involves uncertainty. Someone messed up the narrative. A player has gone rogue. She was using her and Kaidan as her double, preparing her survival at their expense. An elaborate double cross, and something in the woods gets her power to pull it off. The hunter then has another monologue of her own. She says a person cannot know whether the next moment will be like any other moment, but one that will change their life or end their life. A deer in the woods goes about its business only knowing by instinct what sort of creature it is. The one who draws her bow is the one who knows what the next moment will be. She will line up her arrow and change the future for whatever is standing in her sight. She asks the thief who she is, and the thief replies and says that she is the hunter. The hunter asks the thief if she has the power to change her life, and the thief replies with a very confident yes. The next day, the thief suddenly breaks into their house and starts searching for the sisters. With a gun in hand, she finds Jory sitting on the bed in her room. Rather than point the gun at her, she tosses the gun to her, and Jory simply looks at the thief like she understands what to do next. In a shocking turn of events, Jory goes to Kaidon's room and shoots her 3 times, butchering her. We then see Jory sitting on the porch that she usually sits at with Kaidon with a little pile of rocks next to her. After thinking for a little while, she stands up and shoots. We then see the thief at the Weevil cultivation facility, going by the name Angela. She works there now, and one of her colleagues congratulates her on getting her degree, but he is surprised that she stayed around. Angela, the thief, simply answers and tells her colleague that she is exactly where she needs to be.